Good afternoon, colleagues. We are ready to start. Apologies for the short delay, but we had to take the official photographs before we started this afternoon. So good afternoon once again. I'm Ellen Tice, the Senior Director, Library and Information Services here at Stellenbosch University Library and Information Service. The program this afternoon is, I will just do the word of welcome. Thereafter, we will have the official opening and launch of Library Research Week 2025 by Professor Sibusiso Moyo, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, Innovation and Postgraduate Studies here at Stellenbosch University. Thereafter, Dr. Saviwe Bangani will introduce our guest speaker this afternoon, and then we hope to have a few minutes for some questions and answers. And thereafter, we will have a reception for those of you who are attending in person. So, a warm welcome to each and every one of you, also those who are joining us remotely, and then all of you here in person, of course. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Library Research Week 2025, one of our flagship annual events at Stellenbosch University Library and Information Service. This is our 13th edition, and we are proud to continue this tradition of not only supporting, but also celebrating the research ecosystem that drives our university forward. Let me begin by acknowledging, first of all, the presence and support of our DVC, Research, Innovation and Postgraduate Studies, Professor Sibu Moyo. Professor Moyo, your consistent support for research development here at Stellenbosch University as the DVC Responsibility Center responsible for the library, your engagement with the library initiatives, it remains a source of encouragement. And as always, you are always available to be when we call on you for this event. And thank you very much for being with us again this year. The theme, and then of course, our special guest and our guest speaker this afternoon, Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela. I'll say a little bit more about her later. The theme for this year's Library Research Week is Let's Partner for Research Impact. This theme reflects our understanding that impactful research does not happen in isolation. It is through collaboration across disciplines, departments, institutions, and even sectors that research becomes truly developmental, sustainable, meaningful, and transformative. This year's program has been carefully curated to reflect every phase of the research journey, from idea conception through ethical planning and methodological design to the use of emerging technologies and ultimately to creating lasting societal impact. The library remains committed to providing practical support and innovative tools that equip researchers to be effective at every stage. Today's launch is especially meaningful because we are indeed honored, truly honored to host a very distinguished guest speaker this afternoon. Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela, she is a 2024 Templeton Prize Laureate. Her lifelong work on trauma, memory, forgiveness, and restorative justice has influenced global discourses and continues to shape how we understand humanity, reconciliation, healing, and hope. Her presentation, Intellectual Life in Academia and Researching Experience on the Irreducible Nature of Encounter, is a reminder that research is not only about data and output, it is about people, histories, identities, and the ethical and emotional encounters that accompany our scholarly work. We are truly privileged to have her here today with us. This week, we invite you to journey with us through a diverse set of presentations and discussions that align to the theme of partnership. On Tuesday, we look at how we can work together throughout the research process We will explore themes such as decoloniality and praxis, responsible copyright and trademark use, building literature reviews, and conducting systematic searches. Wednesday shifts our focus to emerging technologies from generative AI and EndNote 25 to Scopus AI and ethical AI use. We look at how digital tools can enhance research productivity, accessibility, and innovation. On Thursday, we examine how to strengthen your research impact. We delve into open access publishing, open science, internationalization, tracking and measuring research impact, and data management through our very own SunDMP platform. Finally, Friday reminds us at the center of all of this is the researcher as a human being. We address well-being, social impact, and the ethics of collective care. I look forward to hearing the inspiring story from Dr. Jason Samuel. He's from one of our offspring companies who transformed his academic work into a real-world impact startup. This year's theme, and indeed this entire program, is also a response to the university's strategic goal of research impact, for which Professor Moyo is responsible. It is our belief that impactful research is ethical, collaborative, open, and inclusive. It's about building a better world through knowledge, and we as a library are here to be your partners in achieving that. To all researchers, academic, postgraduate students, professional staff attending this week, we hope you will leave every session with something new, a new insight, a new tool, a new understanding, or even a renewed sense of purpose. This is your week that we provide to you. Let's partner for research impact, and let's make that impact together. Thank you very much. And now I call on Professor Moyo to come and give her remarks.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. And also to those online, so it's really great again to be here. Even though today, I think this week, suddenly the weather changed, right? I think it meant so many people sort of maybe might have thought, really, we are going to just join online? Because usually the hall is full, but maybe the weather was, not on our side, but to improve. So again, good afternoon, and it really gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this Library Research Week. I'd like to start, of course, by thanking our Senior Director of the Library and Information Services, Ms. Ellen Tice, for all the work that's been done in the library, together with Dr. Siviwe Bangane, the Director for Research Services, who is also part of the management team that's present here from the library, and all the staff. So thank you so much for organizing this and for the work that you do, which goes it goes noticed and appreciated, and sometimes we may not say thank you enough, but the fact that things are running efficiently and there are no complaints means that, we are really grateful. We may not always show in person to say thank you, but we really thank you for that. And can I ask you to clap for yourselves, because nobody will. Thank you so much. And then, of course, our guest speaker, who has also been welcomed for 2025, the 2024 Templeton Prize winner, Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela, an author and scholar recognized for her work and insights into the mechanisms of trauma and forgiveness in post-apartheid South Africa, which have created a globally recognized model for social healing in the aftermath of conflict, a model she calls, of course, the reparative quest. So I want to really thank you, Prof, for making time. I know you are very busy. She's in charge of a center, of course, within the university, and you can imagine there's emerging scholars and, postdocs, researchers, and other people who are associated with the university. It does take a lot of time to make sure everything is in place, and the library, just makes it easier if there are resources for these students, and there are workshops that students can attend for various skills. So thank you so much, Prof, for joining us. The executive deans and deputy deans, researchers, lecturers, library staff, again, postgraduate students, in-person and virtual attendees, I will observe all protocol here. And then also, I thank the other institutions. I know there are members of staff who are joining us also from other institutions, colleagues and researchers whom we should acknowledge. So here's the question: why is the Library Week important in the life cycle of the university? So the Library Week, of course, gives us the chance to recognize the essential role that our library plays in the academic life of the university. So apart from being a home for books and journals, traditionally what we've known, our libraries have become dynamic spaces of discovery, learning, and connection. So they support, of course, staff, students, and researchers in pursuing knowledge that drives a positive change in our country and beyond. But also I think what's important is they create those spaces where we can connect and collaborate. So you can see today just by walking in, of course the students are studying, and one of the reasons it may be quiet this week is because everybody's preparing for exams. I just went to a seminar, I think before this one, where I was told most of the students are busy preparing for exams, but we provide that space as well where they can work in a safe space. So we are extremely proud, of course, of the innovations that the library is involved in, both in the maker space, for example, and the upcoming data visualization infrastructure, which we look forward to launching soon. So I should really thank you for some of the innovations that you are doing as a library. So libraries are key to promoting equal access to information, supporting scholarly excellence, and fostering a culture of curiosity and critical thinking. So now the question is, how do we promote critical thinking? Because that becomes important. And I think about an hour ago, I was also in an interview where somebody was interviewing me about the use of AI, and what do you think is AI, and what is the response of the university to AI? So I think one of the things is there, how do we make sure that our students can still think critically? And it's probably not just students, but also staff, researchers in what we do. So this has become a critical element of both for the learning, teaching, and research practitioners. So the library, I think, is an important place where it can provide us with tools and resources that allow us to allow knowledge to grow, but also ideas that can shape and help us to really think about solutions to some of these questions. So this week for us also expresses our appreciation to the librarians and support staff who work tirelessly to provide guidance and maintain these centers of learning. And I want to include here the Division for Research Development, which also through this work is really being supported as well to advance the work which we should be doing as a university to support our researchers and students. And also the support, of course, of the faculties and research centers like AFRIC, which is represented here through Prof Pumla as well. So again, the week is a reminder that we must invest in our libraries. So I know that I did meet one of our colleagues here was saying, give us the money, then we can change. So I said, okay, look at our infrastructure. It is excellent, but we can do better. And so we know, yes, we have to invest in the future of education through the library to support our research and innovation. So for Stellenbosch University, our investment in the library enterprise is significantly huge, of course, but the director might argue that, well, we hardly make it sometimes, but this year was not a bad year because we were able to subscribe to everything that we needed to subscribe to. So thank you so much, Ellen and the team, for making sure that we could get all our resources on board. And then I think, so the other thing I just want to say then is to express appreciation to all of you, once again, our staff and our support staff who support and work tirelessly to provide and maintain the library, and also to help our students and researchers in everything that you are doing. We also encourage innovation in the services that you provide to just help also as we go along. I want to end with a quote from our keynote speaker today, even though she has not spoken yet, but I got a quote before, not from her, from her book, which I think, given where we are today, with the geopolitics and our economy, and the three triple challenges which we still face as a country on poverty, inequality, and unemployment, and then also, as you know, with the American withdrawal of our funding, which is really impacting the health research, with the geopolitics and wars which are taking place in different parts of the world where many researchers are affected. So I thought I could end the quote as follows. So she says in one of her quotations that through the many encounters I had in my work, when I served on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I learned that ordinary people under certain circumstances are capable of far greater evil than we could have imagined. But so we are capable of far greater virtue than we might have thought. And I quote, end of quote. So with these few words, please continue helping others, facilitating spaces for creativity, dialogue, critical thinking, and continue to be creative and innovative and be kind to others as well in your work and in our everyday lives. So I now declare the 2025 Library Week open. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Moyo and Ms. Ellen Tice. Mine is really a simple task, which is to introduce Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela. I must just say, Professor Moyo, you quoted from her book. The first time I had any interaction with her, I actually embarrassed myself. She doesn't know that. But I was a young librarian at UCT. It must have been 2003. And then she calls me. I have her book in front of me. And then she says, I'm Associate Professor Gobodo-Madikizela. And then I knew it was her. And then I started to tell her about her book. Then thereafter, because I was just looking, hey, I have your book in front of me, and she didn't have an opportunity to say what she was calling for. And then thereafter, she did indicate to me that, no, I actually wanted to ask if you can buy my book, and all those things. But that remained with me for quite some time, because that was a very embarrassing moment. After that, I thought to myself, gosh, I shouldn't have done that. It's her book. Now I'm telling her about her book. So that's why I decided deliberately not to quote from her book. Yes, I actually read it after inviting you, Prof, and I had to reread it. Professor Gobodo-Madikizela, as already indicated, is the 2024 Templeton Prize laureate. She is, I wanted to make this point so that everybody knows. She is only the third African. I didn't get this from her, actually, I added my own stuff. She is the third African and the third South African to receive this distinction, following in the footsteps of Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Professor George Ellis from UCT. She's the director of the Center for the Study of the After of Violence and Reparative Quest, and the South African National Research Chair, that's a SACHI chair, in Violent Histories and Transgenerational Trauma here at Stellenbosch University. Again, she didn't give me this part. I took liberty to edit myself. She obtained her master's degree in clinical psychology at Rhodes University, and she received her PhD in psychology from UCT. Professor Gobodo-Madikizela was appointed an associate professor of psychology at UCT in 2003. That's when she actually called me. She became a full professor at the same university in 2010. She served on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was chaired by the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Her acclaimed book, I also added this, A Human Being Died That Night, won several awards, including the Alan Paton Award and the Christopher Award in the United States. The book was adapted into a play that premiered at London's Hampstead Theatre in 2013. Professor Gobodo-Madikizela's research focuses on trauma and the psychoanalytical interpretation of remorse and forgiveness. She holds a B rating from the NRF and is a member of the Academy of Science of South Africa and an honorary member of the South African Psychoanalytical Association. Her recent honors include her Oppenheimer Fellowship Award in 2021, a Harvard Radcliffe Institute Fellowship 2020 to 2021, an honorary doctorate from Rhodes University, and many others. You would understand a distinguished person like her would get, a lot of awards all over the world. But she is a distinguished scholar and humanitarian. Professor Gobodo-Madikizela continues to be a leading voice in the global discourse on justice, healing, and reconciliation. Over to you, Prof. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that really wonderful introduction. I didn't remember you at UCT at all, but to be together here now after that history is wonderful to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you also to all the library colleagues. We work very closely with the library when we have our orientation week. So we feel at home, very much at home, and in fact some of the colleagues from the library come to our events as well. So it's wonderful to see the faces and to be introduced in such a warm way. Thank you very much. I am absolutely thrilled that you were here, Prof. Moyo. Thank you very much for your words. And lastly, I mentioned my colleague, Melanie from the center, who's brought her warmth and sits in front to make sure that I am held. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you. You know, on the way here, just about the transformation office, there were, I'm going to tell some stories today. There were, the first encounter I had was with two young men. One is talking to the other one, trying to tell him about his Christian faith and saying, faith without action is nothing. And so he's trying to convince this other one. And I find this just so fascinating. So I give him a high five and I walk on. And then there's the two women, and the one is talking to the other, also very in an animated sense. She says, everything is political. Everything is political. And I say, yes, it is. You're right. And I couldn't help thinking that both of these encounters, in a way, speak to my work. And the first one, to the idea of what is research without its impacting the social, and the fact that, of course, that all the work that we do is political. So I was very intrigued by these encounters. And in a way, my work is about encounters. My work and my research always speaks to or responds to encounters. I'm inspired by encounters. I often say to my students that don't underestimate your experience as the site where you create knowledge from. That your experience, the encounters you have, if you stop and you think about what just happened, and you turn it around and you really try to figure out, you've never had this experience, something unique, it's a phenomenon that you have not encountered, not in your experience with these particular people, nor in the books. It's an opportunity for you to turn it around, to look carefully into it, to use it as a study, as a site for knowledge making. And so that's my work is like that. But precisely because it's work that reflects on some of these encounters, over time, one encounters different kinds of experiences. One is exposed to different kinds of experiences because time changes, circumstances change, conditions change, social conditions change. And so you find that what you experienced a few years ago will also you will encounter something perhaps that is in contradistinction to what you experienced, or something that makes you question those previous experiences that brought you to this site of knowledge making. So you'll see from my work that while, as I say in the abstract, while my work started and while everybody's talking about my work focusing on forgiveness, empathy, and all, phenomena that are related to forgiveness, trauma, historical trauma. My work, the publications that I've had relate to this, but at the same time, there's a moment where I pause and I reflect on what's going on in the current political moment, and then I ask new questions. My earlier work, for example, trauma, forgiveness, and the witnessing dance, making public spaces intimate. And this is some of the work, and I just want to show you the trajectory of some of the questions. Some of it is similar, and then you'll see when it changes. Empathic repair after mass trauma, when vengeance is arrested. Intersubjectivity and embodiment, breaking intergenerational cycles of repetition, a global dialogue on historical trauma and memory. What does it mean to be human in the aftermath of mass trauma and violence? And I must say that sometimes my work has taken me outside of my country. Although my work is based mostly in my country, the applicability of this work, because of so much violence in the world, there's resonances with other parts of the globe. So this paper, for instance, What Does It Mean to Be Human, was inspired by an encounter with a story within the Holocaust, and that led to a book that was called History, Trauma, and Shame. And again, a response to a particular moment of encounter, asking the question, what does it mean to be human in the aftermath of trauma and violence? And then I wanted to give you this other title, which sort of segues into some of the questions that exercise my mind now. The paper that is titled, Forgiveness is the Wrong Word. Empathic repair and the potential for human connection in the aftermath of historical trauma. So those are some of the questions that I've been concerned with in my work. The primary aim here, however, is to critically consider and sometimes problematize some of the premises on which my project has been based. And also, I also consider some of the ways in which this work that I've been doing has been conceptualized, and argue for a clearer conceptualization of these terms, forgiveness, empathy, reconciliation after trauma, and especially including in these questions the question of the embodiment. What does it mean that we bring our bodies into these encounters? What do we learn from looking carefully into what the body brings into this work? It has not been my aim to champion a conceptualization, a particular conceptualizations of these terms that I've been researching, or to suggest what related responses might be indicative when we use these terms and how they might be measured. This is not my goal. My goal is to try to understand what is this experience like. And so now I'm drawn into really thinking about what the embodiment, what we bring as embodied subjects into our encounters. Now, what is perhaps necessary in our examination of these, or in my examination of these concepts, is that the experience, the nature of experience, is more important than necessarily conclusively defining what phenomena are. The experience itself, the process involved in encountering another, what is evoked, how do we understand the subtleties of these encounters? Because if you focus on experience, more enigmatic aspects of the experience, complicated, muddy, elusive, and not always very admirable, but this will bring us closer and closer to new knowledges. I suggest that a conceptual distinction between feeling, emotion, and affect could be a way of traversing at least some of the incredibly complicated and multifaceted terrain of experience, and significantly, the kinds of experiences that I'm interested in. My analysis usually follows the skeletal lines of an argument, a train of thought as it begins, based on a particular experience that I'm reflecting on, darting at times this way and that, as it always and as it always also explores the byways of these kinds of focused moments. My inquiry meanders past gender, and I'll say more about why my exploration does not always necessarily focus on issues of gender, because it's a reflection on the imagination, on what is evoked at the particular moment, pausing a little to consider the body and its ways of knowing, with a particular emphasis on the utility of feelings as theoretical category, and finally coming to rest at the category which I'm about today, the category of experience. I want to start with three stories. One is short stories. A woman in Chicago, I'm going to give a keynote at an event, a public event in Chicago. She's fetching me at the airport, and she's late. And so she rushes, I'm waiting there. She runs to me, said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. I was worried, but then I thought I'm coming to meet the forgiver of the world. So it may not be that bad." And then here on campus, once we had another conversation with a young woman who forgave Eugene de Kock. It was during Vote Fierce, and so I was chairing and facilitating this event, and one of the students during Q&A accused me of always forgiving white people. And so those two stories got it totally wrong. The issue is not, I'm not advocating, this is not an advocacy. It's a curiosity about what a phenomenon means, especially because what I encountered in terms of the phenomenon, I had not seen it anywhere else in the literature. In fact, scholars, experts have said it's not possible in the aftermath of radical evil, one of whom is Hannah Arendt. She talks about forgiveness, but she says, on this part, when it comes to radical evil, this is not possible. And so I was curious and pursued exploring this dynamic. So these people who think by doing this research, it means I'm a forgiver, or that I am forgiving white people all the time, they got it wrong. Now, here is another a story that brings me to the subject of today. Yesterday, over the weekend, I was with friends. We were over lunch at my home, and I was talking about today. I was saying, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, and so sort of exploring ideas with them. One of the friends who studies gender very closely, forgiveness, empathy, reconciliation after trauma, and especially including in these questions the question of the embodiment. What does it mean that we bring our bodies into these encounters? What do we learn from looking carefully into what the body brings into this work? It has not been my aim to champion a conceptualization, a particular conceptualizations of these terms that I've been researching, or to suggest what related responses might be indicative when we use these terms and how they might be measured. This is not my goal. My goal is to try to understand what is this experience like. And so now I'm drawn into really thinking about what the embodiment, what we bring as embodied subjects into our encounters. Now, what is perhaps necessary in our examination of these, or in my examination of these concepts, is that the experience, the nature of experience is more important than necessarily conclusively defining what phenomena are. The experience itself, the process involved in encountering another, what is evoked, how do we understand the subtleties of these encounters? Because if you focus on experience, more enigmatic aspects of the experience, complicated, muddy, elusive, and not always very admirable, but this will bring us closer and closer to new knowledges. I suggest that a conceptual distinction between feeling, emotion, and affect could be a way of traversing at least some of the incredibly complicated and multifaceted terrain of experience, and significantly, the kinds of experiences that I'm interested in. My analysis usually follows the skeletal lines of an argument, a train of thought as it begins, based on a particular experience that I'm reflecting on, darting at times this way and that, as it always explores, and as it always also explores the byways of these kinds of focused moments. My inquiry meanders past gender, and I'll say more about why my exploration does not always necessarily focus on issues of gender, because it's a reflection on the imagination, on what is evoked at the particular moment, pausing a little to consider the body and its ways of knowing, with a particular emphasis on the utility of feelings as theoretical category, and finally coming to rest at the category which I'm about today, the category of experience. I want to start with three stories. One is short stories. A woman in Chicago, I'm going to give a keynote at an event, a public event in Chicago. She's fetching me at the airport, and she's late. And so she rushes, I'm waiting there. She runs to me, said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. You know, I was worried, but then I thought I'm coming to meet the forgiver of the world. So it may not be that bad." And then here on campus, once we had another conversation with a young woman who forgave Eugene de Kock. It was during Vote Fierce, and so I was chairing and facilitating this event, and one of the students during Q&A accused me of always forgiving white people. And so those two stories got it totally wrong. You know, the issue is not, I'm not advocating, you know, this is not an advocacy. It's a curiosity about what a phenomenon means, especially because what I encountered in terms of the phenomenon, I had not seen it anywhere else in the literature. In fact, scholars, experts have said it's not possible in the aftermath of radical evil, one of whom is Hannah Arendt. She talks about forgiveness, but she says, on this part, when it comes to radical evil, this is not possible. And so I was curious and pursued exploring this dynamic. So these people who think by doing this research, it means I'm a forgiver, or that I am forgiving white people all the time, they got it wrong. Now, here is another a story that brings me to the subject of today. Yesterday, over the weekend, I was with friends. We were over lunch at my home, and I was talking about today. I was saying, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, you know, and so sort of exploring ideas with them. One of the friends who studies gender very closely, she calls herself a feminist. She says, but your work you don't deal with gender at all. You don't touch on gender in your work. And so there was a debate then, sort of like an accusatory sort of tone that you must involve gender. Maybe that's what you should talk about, she says. Talk about gender. Now, Tori Moy, who is a feminist and queer theorist, proposes in her essay, What is a Woman?, that feminists and queer theorists should focus on the concept of the lived body rather than the concept of gender. She argues that the lived body is a more effective framework for understanding subjectivity and experience, and this is my premise as well. This approach allows for a more nuanced understanding of individual experiences and social structures. Tori Moy, of course, is drawing also from, feminist scholars like the early feminist scholar Simone de Beauvoir, for example, who writes about the situation, the body as situation. And so they're drawing from this a critique of the focus, too much of a focus on gender as a focus, and rather say, let us deal with experience, because you find that you will get more, you will expand knowledge by focusing on experience rather than on these concepts. For me, then, it's very more important to recognize that the finer substance of these experiences or their texture are different because they are experienced by different people at different historical moments in different societies, geographies, cultural contexts, by people of different races, classes, religious backgrounds, sexual orientations, and bodies with different capabilities. And so experience then draws us closer and closer to these very finer nuances. And this is where I think the lived body, or more specifically, the body as situation, as Simone de Beauvoir would say, is a useful theoretical frame precisely because it allows for engagement with more varied, quote, concrete lived experiences, unquote, such as examples of the stories that I work with in my work. Now, I want to expand on Tori Moy's championing of this idea of body as situation as a more useful category when theorizing experiences in general, but experiences where women are involved in particular. So she says, quote, in contemporary feminist theory, so much energy is spent keeping the specter of biologically based essentialism at bay that it is easy to forget that generalizations about gender may be just as oppressive as generalizations about sex, unquote. So she explains that to claim that the body is a situation is to acknowledge that the meaning of a woman's body is bound up with the way she uses her freedom. For Simone de Beauvoir, our freedom is not absolute, but situated. Other situations, as well as our particular lived experience, will influence our projects, which in turn will shape our experience of the body. In this way, each woman's experience of her body is bound up with a project in the world. There are innumerable different ways of living with one's specific bodily potential as a woman. And so here is one that I am busy engaged with at the moment in terms of my current interest of research. It's another story. I am walking on Victoria Road, and it's just before COVID, after I'd given this event, I chaired this event where this young man accused me of always forgiving white people. And so I'm walking, things have just shut down. Suddenly, you remember during COVID 2020, March, things just immediately shut down. Everyone left. So I'm walking alone just past the museum. And I'm feeling good with myself. You know that feeling? You know, this is why the body is so important, where you are walking and you really feel like you belong here. I really feel, I was feeling that sense of, I belong, I'm walking here. I just had a wonderful conversation and with colleagues and people from the broader society, and I was feeling good about myself. And there's a voice that issues out from, in my mind, it's funny how the mind works. It felt as if there are trees there just between the museum and Vergenhof. But it's not a forest, but somehow it felt like a forest. There's a voice that says, Gaffer. And it's a soft voice. It says, Gaffer. And I'm alone. There's no one. It's very quiet. It says, Gaffer. And then I walk along. I ignore the voice. And the voice repeats, a little louder now, but still soft, Gaffer. It's a man's voice, and I can hear it's a young man's voice. And then just as I cross the street, about to cross the street to the other side, towards the Kerk, because I'm walking towards our office, a colleague, for context, it's a white colleague, approaches me, and we're very good friends with him. And he says, "You look so beautiful." And it's an affirmation of exactly how I felt. And so I crossed the street, and so this is the voice of the colleague. And then as I cross, there's a young man who is a car guard. I'm very friendly with him. We often stop and talk. He calls out, "Mamzo." And then I wave at him. And at that moment, something happens to me. At that moment, I feel that, in fact, I say in my head, I say, "That's me." So this voice, what I'm forgetting is that the third time, it says, "Gaffer," and this time it's a little louder. But at the same time, the voice across calls out, "Mamzo," and I say inside my head, "That's me." And it raises a question for me right then. It doesn't raise a question, but it gives me an insight that so often we allow to behave in ways that others call us. You know, they interpolate in a certain way. You are, you are worthless, you are an object, you are this or the other, as this young man was trying to do. But the refusal, actually, the potential for refusal is always there for us to embrace, so that we reclaim our right to something else other than what we are being called. And so for me, this was an opportunity to explore differently the idea of an encounter with racism. In other words, to explore it in a way that suggests a place of refusal, responding to this racism from a place of refusal. I am not what you say I am. I gave a talk at Steers in 23 September entitled, "I Am Not Your White Gaze," of blackness, whiteness, and the meaning of repair. And this is a paper that I continue to write as these things happen. I'm a slow thinker when it comes to this. I'm a slow thinker even in conversation when there are events. I'm always, mulling over things. And, there are people who are like sharp. They're always quick with their questions. I'm always slow. So from 23 to now, I'm still working out what this encounter was, and of course, using it as a source of as a site for knowledge production. I'm building on it, and it's leading me into very interesting paths. Now, my body is very much part of this encounter, because my body as a black woman in that space on Victoria Road, it's Reinefeld, not Victoria, on Reinefeld Road, it's a body that is viewed in a particular, or that evokes something else in someone who has an apartheid mind. And I want actually to call this not whiteness, but the apartheid mind. Someone who has an apartheid mind, I'm walking there, as I said, feeling confident, feeling like I belong here and walking with a sense of confidence. It rubs him the wrong way. How does he define himself if this black woman is walking on this street so confidently? So these are the kinds of questions that, for me, I find that they are more inspirational. Now, the place of the body, again, here, is very critical because the reaction to me, I'm not in proximity with this person. I am far, I don't even see him. But there's a way, there's a kind of a wave of connection in this, in this kind of network of connection and interaction. Even in a space, in the spatial sense, we are connected because he's there, he can see me, he's reacting to me. And here I am responding to this young man, calling to me, you know, as Mamzo. I am this elder, this person who could be his mother, and it warms my heart. So all of this, there are emotions, it's affect, you know, I feel excited, there's a smile in my heart, and so the affect is very much part of it, and which is to say the body is very much a part of it. And so it allows us then, the lens gives us language to go into this. Your situation and you are not two things. This is now Eugene Grandling. He's a philosopher, he was a philosopher and psychotherapist. Your situation is not, you know, often in psychology, there's the external experience and the internal experience. And this idea of looking at the embodied, at the full, whole way of responding, you are looking at a much more complete. The external and the internal are in dialogue all the time. And so we should pay attention to the dialogue between that man over there and me, inspires something in me, reminds me, and then drives me to the point of saying, I am not that, but I am that. And so, it starts with how I react, how I respond. And this is very important. So Eugene Grandling says, your situation and you are not two things as if the external things were a situation without you. Nor is your bodily sense separate from the situation and merely internal. The body sense is the situation, inherently an interaction, not a mix of two things. And so here's one last story that I'm going to tell, and I'm going to end. I know my colleagues are worried that I'm going to go on. I promise you, this is the last story. So actually, I think I better read it so that it really goes quick. Brian Stevenson. Any of you know who Brian Stevenson is? He's a human rights lawyer, African-American human rights lawyer, who is responsible for building the museum. For short, it's called the Lynch Museum, but otherwise it's called the Museum of Peace and Justice. And it commemorates lynchings in the United States. There's a long, look it up, it's really a fascinating project. He's speaking at a conference, a psychoanalytic conference a few years ago, and he recounts, he recounts a scene involving a woman who traveled. One of what I wanted to say is that one of the things that Stevenson does, he asks people to collect sand, soil, from the sites of lynching. And if people know where their loved ones were lynched, he encourages them to go to the site and to dig up the soil, put it in jars. It's jars, they like the jars that we used to use for canning. And collect the soil, and the soil, there are all these jars at this museum to commemorate the lynching in various parts of the United States. So he recounts a scene where one of the women who has a relative who was lynched travels to the south to dig up the soil. And so as she was digging, already anxious. She's in the south, and she's anxious, and it's in the outskirts, and already anxious about being alone in a remote area marked by the terror of histories of such as the one that brought her there. Her fear escalated when a truck pulled up nearby. A burly white man got out and asked what she was doing. She explained she's collecting the soil and so on. The man then asked to see the news article, because Brian Stevenson gave people a piece of paper to explain so that they don't have to explain themselves. So she hands him the paper and he reads it. He reads the paper. After reading it and the story of the particular person who was lynched there, he asked if he could help her dig. When she offered him a shovel she had brought, he declined and instead dropped to his knees and began to dig with his bare hands. As they continued, the woman noticed that the man's face was reddening with emotion. Tears were running down his face, his cheeks. When she asked if he was okay, he said that being there at that site made him realize that his own grandfather may have been complicit in the lynching of the ancestor. This moment marked a profound shift, a display of vulnerability that's created an opening, an unexpected space of recognition between the woman and the man who had joined her in the act of remembrance. Now, I go on, but I will not go into another explanatory section on what my interpretation of what is going on, but it speaks to this idea of what happens when bodies come together in that close proximity. Now, the concept that some scholars, particularly scholars who are interested in embodiment, Merleau-Ponty, Eugene Grandling, they speak about the notion of opacity. In other words, the idea that we cannot know everything, that when we encounter one another, we cannot describe everything that happens in that encounter, and that when we define things in binaries, victims, perpetrators, and those kinds of binaries, women, men, and so on, we lose the richness of what is going on here. And so the concept of opacity then, in writing about this context, Eugene Grandling is actually writing in the context of colonial histories and post-colonial encounters. And the person who takes this up is Edouard Glissant, coining the term right to opacity, which suggests that the encounter between two people can go anywhere, in any direction, and if you follow that direction, you may reach a dead end, because you may find that it's not what you thought. You may misinterpret it and find that there's something much deeper that you are missing. And so the focus on the minutiae of this experience is really what is key here, that we look at the interaction between what is happening within the person and what the encounter is happening outside, so that you understand whether it is shame or guilt or fear, you come to it through a focus on these particular moments of encounter. Now, while these notions of the opacity an understanding, the deeper understanding of these colonial encounters, while it focuses mostly on the post-colonial encounters, is actually applicable in all our experiences, when even in our workplace. Sometimes violence is not the spectacular kind of violence. It's the kinds of things people say in the workplace, the whisperings, the secrecy, the intrigue, the kinds of things that are said behind your back. That is violence. And so if we focus on what we feel sometimes at these moments, it will lead us to understanding what's going on here. Why are these people acting in the way that they're acting? Now, I want to conclude by pointing out that part of what I'm interested in this idea of experience is really to think about how do we build a sense of solidarity? How do we, it's easy, we know we live in a place such as Stellenbosch with all its history, and we bring all our histories and all our traumas or our shame or our denials for that matter. I'm interested in the question of what do we learn from these encounters that can help us understand what people are going through on all sides? How do we listen more carefully? How do we see more clearly when we have these encounters, so that it informs our theorizing about these notions of transformation? And then ultimately, what does it take to build a sense of solidarity? It seems to me that the more we come closer to one another, the more we encounter one another, the more we really try to learn from the proximity to one another, the more it will inspire us to rethink some of the ideas and concepts that we have used in the past that have divided us. Of course, it is not always the case that this is how it happens. We know that it's not always that when people come together, then the positive outcomes are going to grow from that encounter. Sometimes the imaginative capacity, our imaginative capacity, doesn't lead us to a place of compassion and empathy, leads us in the other direction. But imaginative capacity is very important. It's important in these efforts that we are making to try and figure out how do we bring this imaginative, how do we animate an imaginative capacity. This is why at our center, we draw on the arts a lot as a possibility of being relieved of suffering, of knowing justice, even love. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gobodo-Madikizela. The only thing I can say about your prestige lecture, it really sounded like a prestige lecture for me, because I'm learning a lot of things as you are speaking, is that it's really inspiring. And we really appreciate your insights, your perspectives, and also the understanding that you are creating for us, and the passion with which you deliver, this prestige lecture. There is a lot of, takeaways from your talk. Basically, you started by asking what is research without impacting the social. basically suggesting that whatever encounter we have, it can be encounter with our own studies. We must gain from those experiences. We must get something from that. And you are warning us not to undermine those experiences and those encounters, but rather to learn from them and take it forward from there. And also, I heard you talking about building a sense of solidarity, and really indicating that the more we encounter one another, the more it leads us to proximity, to some of the negative and the positive aspects, of actually collaborating, partnering with other people. But in any case, I'll just open the floor for questions. Okay, we've got a question. I wanted to start with online this time around, but I say Miss Ellen Tice, can't wait.
Just going to say maybe just 1 or 2 questions.
Okay. Okay, just 1 or 2 questions. We don't have a lot of time. Oh, that was just a comment or a suggestion. Gekna, is there a question there? Go ahead.
Okay, here is a question from Jason Hutchison. First, a comment. Thank you so much, Professor. This is phenomenal. I am teaching the TRC to matrics, and this will be amazing. What is one thing a matric learner should know with regards to the TRC?
It's a very good, a very important question. Okay, let me first tell myself that I must not give a long answer, because, and the way to do that is simply to say that the Truth Commission was established to look our past in the face. It was to face history. Some years ago, I served on the board of an organization called Facing History and Ourselves. And it was facing mostly Holocaust history and included racism in the US. And that's what the TRC, that's really the main thing that a high school student should understand, that it is facing history, because we often, the 2 ways of responding to the past, you can push it under the carpet and simply move on. As some people say, let's just move on. But experience has shown over and over again, all over the world, that that is dangerous, that the past returns. And so it's important to face it in a way of really dealing with it and accounting for it and acknowledging the hurt that was caused on generations, that before, which is carried, into the present by descendants of those people who experienced it directly. So that's really, it's about facing history. I like that expression, facing history and ourselves, as capturing what the TRC was trying to do.
Maybe we can still have another question, just a last one. Is there a question from there? Good now?
No, just a further response from the person who asked the question.
Okay. If there are no questions, then I'll take the privilege of asking one. Okay? No, go ahead, Ms. Tice, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Pumla. I was saying, we could easily sit here and listen to you for another hour and more. There's just so much making us reflecting on ourselves. And as you had, I think for me, the thing that you highlighted, because I'm sure we all struggle this one way or the other, doesn't matter what job we do, and at work, these small violences, the things that people think because, that hurt people, and that always we each one of us see it from our own point of view. So somebody had said something, or you heard something and you heard, and that person is also heard. But, we don't try to encounter and what it is, why is it so. So it was really very good to ask you that. But it's actually very question not based on what you said, but maybe some of the comments the stories that you told. Would you forgive the refugees who left yesterday for the US?
It's interesting, I wanted to start my, it's interesting you should, thank you. It's interesting you should say that. Originally, when I wanted to start my presentation today, by referring to an article I'd written some time ago, 2012 or even earlier, in which I kind of, I was speaking about the wounded Afrikaners, and how the change and transformation has been difficult for many Afrikaners because for them, they see this as a loss, and they have not had a chance to mourn the loss. And that is why there's always something unfinished. Because mourning is such an important part. If you mourn the loss of something. There hasn't been an opportunity. The space doesn't allow that. You are moving forward, and it's all about the victims of apartheid, but very little about the people who have lost in a different way. So, in a way, I can see why it's escalated into what happened now today. Probably they're arriving now in the US, I think. I think Donald Trump is probably at Dallas airport now receiving them.
Okay, maybe last question before we do a vote of thanks. Okay, it looks like there's no
For me,
question.
actually, I always wonder, how do these kinds of conversations land? There's always missing in these conversations. How do they land, these kinds of discussions? There are discussions about us, about who we are in our institution, but also in our country. And there isn't always a response to that, even at our center, actually, when we have these similar conversations. There's the responses always come from Black people who have encountered, bad experiences in the workplace, in their offices, or, in the city, but never a sense of what do these conversations mean? What do they evoke? I think this is something that, you may not answer, but it's something that interests me as well in terms of encounters, during our talk about what we are exploring in our research. So if anyone is inspired to respond, I would be delighted, very...
It's inspired.
Thank you very much, Prof. The mind can go in a tangent into different directions, have you indicated because of this encounters and encounterology. I'm Kolile Simon from the Faculty of Theology, but also the resident head of Hayes Russell Botman House. Now, I often then sit with different groups of leaders, and some of them are like senior students in senior spaces, PhD. And when you start this kind of conversations, they actually, even at that level, goes to the basic issues of respect in these encounters, of recognition. And people want that kind of spaces. I mean, it was now Mother's Day and my spouse was there, so we had cake and flowers, but it evokes something. And I actually agree. You can really not in any academic space, management space, jump over this experience. Otherwise, we hide it or we fake it, and where there are some crises, something activated and come out. So it's clear for now we should actually have strong propositions. We should actually see what could be the possible outcomes if we go into spaces like that. Otherwise, we'll always be cover up, and so. So I just say from my personal perspective, I'll do my presentation tomorrow morning, but it evokes something in me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't have time anymore, but maybe let me squeeze my question in, Prof. So, Prof, I just wanted to ask, in terms of, yeah, I'm squeezing it in. Yes, what you are talking about for me, I really associate it with the Ubuntu values, reconciliation, transformation, etc., etc. So I was just wondering, to what extent did your upbringing influence your research trajectory that you are now following?
100%. 100% influence. It's always, it's my upbringing, it's my faith, it's the encounters I've had in the world. It's also the difficult encounters, the difficult moments. I mean, remember, my generation, we went to universities when there would be 5 of you. You would be the only 5, or actually, you would be the only one in a class of, 6 clinical master's students. You're the only black person. And those encounters teach you so richly because you experience how people struggle with you. They don't know how to relate to you. They really, and you understand that they're really struggling because they haven't had an opportunity to be in a space with a person on an equal, like you, on an equal level. And the openness, I think also, I think bringing up children with love is so important. I mean, it's not the only thing, obviously, but there is something about the value of knowing what love is, so that you impart it on others, and the value of loving. It doesn't mean you will accept everything that happens, absolutely not. But it means that there's a certain sense of, what lies behind, there's something else beyond what you see. If a person is nasty, or a person is gossipy or tries to, to be petty, that sometimes you might open up something else, or if a person is hateful. I mean, there are stories even here at Stellenbosch where the most unimaginable friendships, at Free State where I was for 5 years, same thing, unimaginable encounters across the color line and friendships. So I've had all of those experiences. So it's the upbringing, and it's also a lot of other things in the social world. Remember, what I was talking about is precisely that point, that we bring ourselves, we bring the way that we are, because remember, the memory is not just cognitive. The whole point of this is that it's not just cognitive, it's not just in the brain. Our bodies carry so much, in the way that you come into the world in a particular way, and the world encounters you in a particular way. When you are walking in a shop as a black person and you can see the eyes already, you know what that means. You don't have to ask the person, and then of course you either shrink or you ignore the person. So it's just that sense of, you bring your body into these spaces. And so it's very important for us to think also about what, where do we speak from, actually? That is, where do you speak from? What is your positionality? And to bring that to bear into the research is also important. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. So all is left now. What is left now is for me to do a vote of thanks. As we conclude today's official launch of Library Research Week, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to everyone who joined us, both in person and online, Of course, this marks the beginning of what promises to be an insightful and inspiring week, as you heard now. A heartfelt thank you to Ms. Tice for her warm words of welcome and for her continuous leadership and support as I continue to lead the Library Research Week. I want to express our appreciation to Professor Sibusiso Moyo for officially opening the week and reminding us of the strategic importance of impactful research. Your presence, I always say this, does elevate the stature of this event as well as enriches the conversations that follow. We are truly indebted to you for your support and leadership. We are especially honored to have had Professor Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela to deliver a powerful keynote address. It's not every day that you'd have a Templeton Prize Award winner, coming here and sitting next to us. So her reflections on the intellectual and emotional dimensions of research remind us that scholarly work is ultimately a human endeavor that is grounded in empathy, encounter, and ethical responsibility. Thank you, Professor, for setting a thoughtful and meaningful tone for the days ahead. From the depths of our heart, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to my fellow Library Research Week 2025 committee members for their unwavering contributions to the success of this event. I already foresee that it will succeed. And the overall organization of Library Research Week. To all members of the audience, your continued support is deeply appreciated, and we recognize that today's successful launch would not have been possible without you. We invite you to continue this journey with us by attending sessions scheduled for tomorrow up until Friday. Your feedback is always welcome as we strive to improve our service to you. As we look ahead to the rest of the week, we encourage you to fully engage with the program, attending sessions, asking questions, sharing your insights, and discovering new tools and new ideas. So we do want those encounters with you. This is your space to learn, to connect, and grow. Let us make the most of this opportunity to truly partner for research impact. Now at this point, I'd like to invite our in-person guests to join us for a reception in the library staff room. To our virtual audience, we apologize for your absence and wish you could have been here with us, and we thank you for your presence online. Thank you once again for joining us for this launch. We look forward to engaging each and every one of you on the days or in the days ahead. Thank you so much.